It's our time to talk Ohio State football with you each and every week. It's a Friday at 2 o'clock Eastern time, so lock it in. Hit the bell for the notifications once you subscribe. Therefore, you know when we're going live with these three gentlemen. You got Tony Gerdeman, Buckeyes Scoop on top, followed by Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports, and Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove on Arrivals. How you guys doing today?
Doing good.
Doing well.
Doing well.
Thanks for jumping on. As always, I hope you guys out there appreciate the expertise we bring with these three each and every week talking Buckeyes. So leave your comments, questions, debate topics in the live chat. I'll be searching for comments that have been left on the channel over the last week. Thank you for getting us very, very, very close to 20,000 subscribers. So push us on over here in the next day or so. Devontae Smith, 3-star. Steve has decommitted. Did that seem to be expected, number one? Number two, a situation in which he's saying, I'm not coming to Ohio State, or just I am back testing the waters?
Well, I think Alabama played a part in this, that they offered him before Ohio State did, it appears, back in February. And then he was offered by Ohio State in mid-March and committed within 3 or 4 days after he got that offer. And Alabama never backed down. They continued to stay right with Devontae Smith and tried to continue to recruit him remotely, as all you could do at this point. No visits either for the coaches out to see the players or the players to come to campus, obviously, during the pandemic. Ohio State was not caught sleeping at all in this. And, they didn't really push Smith out or encourage him to leave. They talked to him quite a bit about staying with Ohio State, even as Alabama was trying to ratchet up the pressure a little bit. They've got 5 other defensive back commitments in this class besides him, and they're still trying to get Derek Davis, a safety from Pennsylvania, and Jordan Hancock, a cornerback, out of his Clemson commitment. So, there's a thought that maybe they will land one of those other guys. And you didn't hear me say this, a little higher ranked perhaps than Smith, who was, I think, by 24/7 composite number 400 nationally, in that range somewhere. So I think it's just a case of, he had the option with Alabama, and I don't know that there's any great intrigue to this, other than maybe he thinks things look more favorable for him to get a chance to play at Alabama than in this logjam of defensive backs at Ohio State.
Kevin, what do you think? Devontae Smith, no go for the Buckeyes, at least right now.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Steve said there. I mean, it was a case of where, I think about a month ago, maybe a little more than a month ago, we did hear some whispers that a player was kind of feeling a little antsy about his position at Ohio State. And I think those of us who connected the dots knew it was Devontae Smith at that point. And, if Devontae Smith didn't cool on Ohio State, he would end up at Ohio State. Ohio State in no way, shape, or form forced him out or anything like that. There are a lot of times that on social media we'll see guys, well, we didn't want him anyway. No, Ohio State wanted him. But when Devontae Smith really kind of started to up it and saying, I'm thinking I want to reopen it, Ohio State's like, well, you got to do what's right for you. You don't want to keep a player locked into a commitment until November, only to have him back out at that point, and then you don't really know what your true numbers are at that point. So, I mean, I think both sides handled this the right way or whatnot, and Devontae now probably is going to end up in Tuscaloosa. That's a hell of a silver medal to end up at Alabama as your backup choice. And, and I don't even want to necessarily frame it in that way, shape, or form. But, so now Ohio State kind of knows where it stands at the position and is certainly going to go after the names Steve mentioned with Derek Davis and Jordan Hancock. And there's some other names out there that they could kick the tires. Something that's interesting is we don't have the camps, so there are not really any camp offers out there. So what happens come September, as long as we have a high school football season as planned, and for these kids that blow up? I mean, I think a lot of programs should keep 1 or 2 spots saved just in case for those late risers, because, and we've talked about on this show before, the Terry McLaurins and the Darren Lees of the world, they weren't on the board that we were talking about in May and June of their going into their senior seasons. They were camp offers or later offers, and I think that there's going to be something to be said about maybe holding a spot or two back.
And when you consider the number of corners that Ohio State is going to recruit, you can understand maybe why one guy feels like maybe you're not getting enough love, or they're trying to recruit too many players at your position. But this is an Ohio State defense with a coach in Kerry Combs who likes to play 3 corners, and that's not including the slot corner position that is now part of the defense. So you're looking at a defense that could have 4 corners on the field throughout the first quarter of a game. And they haven't had great success of late in the recruiting those corners. They've missed out on some guys and only had, I brought in 2 last year. So they've got to continue to build up those numbers, and they're still going to be going out looking for more corners. And if you're kind of wishy-washy on competition, I don't know if going to Alabama is the place where a corner is going to find it easy, just as he wouldn't find it easy at Ohio State. But, you do what you got to do for yourself. Ohio State's secondary class right now, I mean, they're versatile. I don't know how many true corners they have other than Ja'Kalen Johnson and I guess Denzel Burke. Jalen, and Jalen Johnson, maybe a safety, maybe a linebacker. Andre Turrentine, maybe a corner, probably a safety. And Jensen Dunn looks remarkable as a guy who's an athletic free safety type, but maybe is athletic enough to be a corner because he's big and tall as well. But you're still going to need to bring in more because not everybody's going to pan out. Not everybody works out. They may you may lose a guy after 3 seasons. The way like Marshawn Lattimore had 1 good season and it was gone. Eli Apple like 1 good season after his redshirt freshman year and is gone. So you just got to keep bringing these guys in because if they don't work out at corner, you put them at safety. Right, but then you look at their last class. I mean, remember they got Cameron Martinez, who's going to be. As something just fell off my desk because of the cat. You got Cameron Martinez, who a lot of people sit there and wanted to see on offense, and Northwestern and some other schools, recruited him on offense. Ohio State's going to put him. He's going to get a look on both sides of the ball, but I think corner is going to be a position there. You got Legend Cavazos, who probably is a safety, but I think he's going to get his first look at corner, and then obviously you have Ryan Watt. So. The corner room is a little thin when you lose Sean Wade and Marcus Williamson after this season. And then, what happens if a Seven Banks or Cameron Brown blows up this year and is gone after 3? You really need to keep hammering that position. And, if there's a position that Ohio State shouldn't struggle at recruiting right now, it's going to be cornerback based on everything that BIA has been able to do.
Talking Ohio State football each and every week with these 3. Tony Gerdeman from the Buckeyes Scoop. You got Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, of course, and Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove. And I think I threw a "the" in there, Tony. Buckeye Scoop. I gave it a "the" at the start, but I think it's just Buckeye Scoop. Tony Gerdeman. We'll get it straight. Appreciate you 3. Tons of questions coming in. We will get to them in just a second regarding recruiting and other things. Daryl Saunders is coming strong in the live chat. I have never seen this name before. We got Daryl Saunders just pumping his fist about Ohio State football. Big Buckeyes fan, picking on Michigan. Maybe we can get them into a bowl game like a Dunkin' Donuts bowl, or said something about but my first thought when I saw Daryl Saunders was that period of time in Ohio State football history, like late 80s, early 90s, when it seemed like every other player on the field was either a Saunders or a Sanders for the Buckeyes at that point. You had Cedric Saunders.
Yeah, they had quite a few.
Yes. All right. So question on the screen dealing with the recruiting aspect of which is the only aspect of the dead period, but we want to get Kevin's thoughts specifically on what was ruled and released on Thursday with the NCAA Division I Council Coordination Committee announcing that the dead period for recruiting extended through August.
I'll touch on that question and then I'll get into the bigger picture. I don't know if it really hurts anybody at this point. I think that somebody that it hurt in terms of Ohio State's chances earlier was J.C. Latham. I think it was really important for Ohio State to get J.C. Latham on campus, keep the momentum going there. We get into this prolonged dead period. Alabama was really able to worm its way in, and that kind of hurt. But, I don't think we're looking at a situation to where we're suddenly going to have visits come September 1. I think it's going to be October, maybe November, and kind of here's why. Because we're working so hard to tighten this circle to get, you got 85 scholarship players, you're a little bit over $105 in terms of with walk-ons, plus coaches, strength coaches, staff, GAs, all of that. They want to keep this circle somewhat small. So do you want to be do you want to send your coaches out on the road to where they're, even with masks or whatnot, they're going into schools and encountering a lot of people and dealing with a lot of travel that's in, unfamiliar flights and hotels and whatnot. And do you want to bring these kids who hopefully will be playing high school football come September and coming into close quarters with everybody? Do you want to bring them inside your circle and expose your team to who knows what's going on with this COVID-19 at that point? So we get through August, we get into September. I think you really need September to be a 4-week laboratory to kind of see where this virus is, how you're able to come and go as you please in terms of football before you bring anybody in. But even at that point, I think they probably are going to want to have a little bit more data and might take it 8 weeks. So we might be looking at just quick and dirty November, December going into early signing period, or even maybe they even get rid of early signing period and we see everybody go in February. But I don't think we're any closer to seeing the NC2A lifting this dead period. And while I'm somebody who makes a living in covering recruiting coverage, and I've been pretty forward and let's open this sucker back up, I think that these are the right decisions. I don't think we should be in any hurry to open the dead period at this point with so much other stuff on the line.
Well, you're Steve on this one.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what Kevin said. I think it would be great for the kids to have the opportunity to get out on the campuses and everything else. But a couple things are going on. Obviously, Ohio's got some basketball players who have been going to Indiana where it's illegal to actually have basketball events right now, whereas I'm not sure here in Ohio we're to that point where they can play 5-on-5. I know Ohio State in particular, their guys were not expecting to be able to play 5-on-5 right at the beginning of the summer when they arrived here a week or so ago. And then I talked to a prospect out of New York for an update that's on our site. And that kid said that in New York, they haven't even talked about having practice for their travel team yet or any events. So in the Midwest and Indiana, you've got teams playing one another and kids getting at least the chance to get out of the house and go play 5-on-5 basketball in organized situations. Whereas back on the East Coast, that they still aren't able to come together to even have a practice, let alone go play in an event or schedule an event or anything like that. Now, I know that there is hope in the month or two ahead that'll happen. I know for this date, it just seemed to me like July 31st was kind of the death knell on guys getting a chance to visit campuses anyway before their season, because they all start practice on or about August the 1st. And you figured, well, maybe there'd be a rush of guys to visit in early August right before their camps get going at the high school level. But obviously that's not going to happen now since the moratorium has been extended to August the 31st. And now what they have to look at is, if you have games in September, can guys visit during games in September? And that's always been a very popular thing. So I guess as we get closer and closer, they'll figure that out. I don't think the news of the last couple of days with the uptick in cases, more new cases yesterday than at any time yet, I guess, in the United States or whatever's being reported. It's not really trending the direction I think any of us want it to go. So I think there's continuing to be as cautious as possible. And yet, and I'm not trying to be overly political, not a political person, all that overtly, but at some point we do need to all go on with our lives, although I guess in some type of a cautious way as well. If you feel that you're at risk, take the proper precautions is what I would say.
I'm also guessing high school coaches don't necessarily want their players traveling all over the country either, while some of these programs are fighting for a state championship or a mythical national championship, and things are going well. And if official visits finally get open, now your players are going wherever and coming back, and who knows what, because it's not just bringing stuff to a college campus, it's bringing stuff back from a college campus based on how some of these visits can go. I would guess they would be greatly tamed down, I would hope. But the idea of official visits right now, it seems like I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen this year. I agree with Kevin. We should probably do away with the early signing period, but there's going to be tons of coaches who don't want that because they've got kids committed that they want, who they would lose if visits get opened up, and they know it. And that's one of the reasons why some of those coaches have been in favor of the early signing period forever, because it allows them to lock in those kids before bigger schools get to see their senior seasons or get to see tape after they've missed out on other players and missed out on other recruits. But the visits, the idea of the visits, Ohio State would definitely like. I think the original question was, how Ohio State would be impacted by the official visits. If they can get Jordan Hancock, the corner committed to Clemson, to ever visit, then maybe that's a guy that can replace Devonta Smith. But if visits don't ever open up, when are the flips going to happen, basically?
Yeah, I'll throw in that player from New York mentioned something that me living in Ohio, I'm not even really aware of, that some states do not want visitors from New York because it is considered to be a hotspot, obviously. And so he's like, I could make a visit to school X somewhere outside the state of New York, but I'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks to be able to do it, or undergo a test, or, whatever, or going or coming back, have to quarantine or whatever. And it's like, you can't give up 2 weeks of your life to go visit a college. So, it's a touchy situation right now in terms of travel. I know our company has said, and we're affiliated with CBS, there's no travel for our company right now. So, and I don't know if that'll be lifted, by the time the season begins, or what the situation will be. So we're kind of at the mercy of this thing right now.
Yeah, there's somebody I know who traveled to another state here. Let's see, this was at the end of May, under certain travel restrictions, and just kind of stealth mode slid in there. So yeah, that's the deal on the recruiting situation. Dead period through August. And then a couple other items that came in related to recruiting. Man, the recruiting class for 2021 obviously is through the roof. I don't know that this is a pertinent question, but of course, every program has its slotting mechanism in recruiting. We need X number of quarterbacks, running backs, et cetera, on down through the roster. That's pretty standard for every program, depending on what kind of offensive and defensive schemes they run. And then they've got to measure that against the comings and goings of the current class, and then the departing class, and so forth and so on. In looking at the 21 class and then combining that with the roster, it was kind of alluded to in one of the questions. Is there a need that's a little bit more prevalent than others from a position standpoint? Anybody on that one? Anything come to mind in regards to they might be a little heavy in this area and want to go in that direction?
In terms of, they're not heavy at offensive line, ironically. They need more offensive linemen after losing out on J.C. Latham, and so they need to continue to build that class and reach out to as many different guys as they can. The heaviness, they've got a ton of defensive backs committed, but like I said before, Jalen Johnson may end up at linebacker, and they're still looking for more. So they clearly don't think they have too many. They could probably take two more in Derek Davis and another corner, and who knows if that would even wrap it up for them. But I think they're set at wide receiver. I think they're okay. I think they're okay at running back. I don't know. Would you guys agree with that?
I think they're okay there.
With the two guys they got, yeah, I'd say if they stick, those are two really good guys. There is a topic we can bring up on this in a moment about one of the running backs, but Evan Pryor. But as I look at my chart, my handy dandy chart right here, where I've got it all plotted out, scholarships, etc.
Steve, you'll have to give us a tour one day of the premises there, of the database.
Yeah, I got
old school,
charts. I got
fortress, the whole
legal
deal.
pads. This is my phone list for basketball. I got legal pads. I got all kinds of stuff.
You got Street and Smiths from 1989. You got all sorts of stuff there.
Exactly.
How's Andre Ware looking?
Phil Steele from 2011 that I sometimes have to reference back, but any rate, I look at this and I on offensive line, they took 6 guys in the class that just signed in 2020. And even if Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis both go pro, which could be a possibility, by my count, they would have 15 guys on the offensive line going into 2021 with the 2 commitments they've got. So that's a 3 deep. I don't know how many more you need, but maybe one more there if the right guy popped up. I think they're in a position. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. One area I think they need help is linebacker.
Yes.
In the next 2 years, they're losing 7 guys out of the linebacker group. So that leaves them, by my count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right now who would be there in 2022. So they need another. I feel they need another linebacker in this class to go with Reed Carrico. The guy that I know Kevin made a trip down and visited with him, and maybe he wants to share some thoughts on Reed. But to me, I think they need help at linebacker. And I think the position they're in such great depth really across the board is they can now take the best player available. They're not tied to position other than maybe linebacker, where I feel they still need to add one. I think they can go out and get the best player available, like the 2 guys from Washington, the defensive lineman and the wide receiver. Those 2 guys would be, tremendous gets for this class. So I'll say to Kevin, if he, I brought up Reed's name and I had something we could say about Pryor as well when this part of the show is done. But I don't know if he had anything to add on it or if he got anything good when he talked to Reed.
Yeah, I'll touch on Reed in half a second, but I think defensive tackle is another position for a couple of reasons. One, you always want to be able to stockpile defensive tackles. There are very few guys that are truly defensive tackles in high school that are defensive tackles in college. A lot of times you're moving ends inside to tackle or whatnot, or guys are just misplaced. Haskell Garrett and Antoine Jackson are both in their final season. What happens if a Tommy Togiai has a real big year this year? I mean, I think that one may be a little bit of, we may be stretching a little bit there, but what if we have a full season that goes off as, with no interruptions, Ohio State lives up to its expectation and wins all of its games and wins the national championship? You generally see a bit of a mass exodus at that point. So somebody like a Tommy Togiai could go there. So, that would leave him with Jerron Cage, Teron Vincent, Jaden McKenzie, and anybody in this class. So I think that's a necessity. When it comes to linebacker and Reed Carrico, he certainly looks the part. I go down to Ironton to go see him, and they're only working in small groups because of social distancing. So I saw a couple of the linebackers. I don't think they had more than 9 guys in a group. Ironton is just, for being a small school on the river, they have some impressive linebackers, and some of their other guys are getting looks too. But you see Reed Carrico walking around, you know who the Ohio State commitment is there. He certainly has the look. He runs really well. Didn't get to see them doing anything with a football because their county had not signed off on it yet. That was coming soon. But based on all the tape I've watched of him, getting to talk to him in person, getting to talk to his coaches about him, I think he's going to be one of those players that Ohio State fans are going to be really excited about. I think that he has just an incredibly high ceiling. And I think that all of our recruiting services need to take another look at him because we might all have him ranked a little too low.
Before Steve jumps in with Evan Pryor, going back to the linebackers, we might see Steel Chambers there in a year, to help build up the roster. And because he's not running back is pretty good right now in terms of depth, and Steel Chambers might end up getting moved over. Defensive tackle, I think maybe Tuamaloa ends up at defensive tackle. He's already, like 280 pounds or something like that. He could end up moving into the 3 technique outside of that defensive end. And that's something Larry Johnson does an awful lot. And no defensive end really wants to talk about becoming a defensive tackle, but I could see that happening for him. And you throw him with Mike Hall, and if they get a Taiwan Malone in there, that's a pretty good haul. They're going to have a great defensive lineman haul anyway, but I think there's some fixes in there that could happen, like Steel Chambers or Tui Maloa to defensive tackle.
Yeah,
Ohio State football. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll throw in
Evan Pryor. News on Evan Pryor.
The story about Evan Pryor. Bill Kurlick from our site shared a story here in the last couple of days. He plays at Cornelius, North Carolina, and Huff, Hough, Huff High School. And he committed to Ohio State back in March, one of the top running backs in the country for 2021. And this is a quote that Bill Kurlick reported. I've talked to a lot of my teammates. This is not the first time we've had racism at our school. It's happened before. So we sat down and talked with the coaches and the team. If there is no change, we will likely sit out the season or change schools. And it says a final decision will likely come in the next few weeks. And that is an interesting development. He said, I know there is a leadership meeting coming up, and we'll bring up the topic, what can be done to change things. That will be in the next week or two. If there is more racism, me and my teammates will have to decide. So that is an Ohio State commitment, one of the top running backs in the country, who is contemplating some major decisions. Is he going to play his senior year at that school, or is he going to sit out and stay at that school, or is he going to transfer and try and play at another school, presumably in his area? So I have no idea what's precipitated this, but I can tell you, I read a tweet from the superintendent of the Hilliard schools, or maybe the principal of one of the high schools. I think it was the superintendent of they have 3 high schools in Hilliard, Ohio, and somebody started an Instagram page, just Dear Hilliard Schools, and it was an open forum for students to go in there and share problems that they had experienced within their school district. And it became a very eye-opening thing that, in terms of diversity and racism and sexism and LGBTQ, concerns and everything else, all kind of wrapped into one. And, schools are a people business was kind of what I came away with the whole thing. And if you're not in tune with, the student body and even the minorities and the people who, feel like they're being tamped down by the system or whatever, you have problems bubbling beneath the surface. I think obviously the George Floyd thing has brought that to light nationally, but I think what Evan Pryor is saying is we've got problems at our school and we'd really like to see them fixed. We'd really rather not have to leave here, but he is threatening that he will. And, it's hard. I can't walk in his shoes. I don't know what he's experienced or what he and his teammates have seen there. You just hope that it's a situation that works out for everybody involved.
Absolutely. That's pretty severe stuff right there. Not playing the season, walking out. The entire team could be unified on that one. We'll have to keep an eye on that one. Interesting. Question about defensive tackle coming in from Jim Jones. Anything on that? Start with Kevin on defensive tackle in regards to what's the rotation look like, starting players.
Well, since they are only lifting weights at this point, I don't think anything has been determined. I know we would all love to be able to sit there and say that we know this, that, and the other, but until they're out there and they move up to 20 hours and are doing on-field instruction and things of that nature, Tommy Togi, I feel, has really come on and is going to be somebody that's going to play a big role. Haskell Garrett has seen a lot of playing time. I think, Teron Vincent had a slow start to his career with an injury-plagued first year. I'm interested to see what Antoine Jackson is able to do. I mean, he was in there in a little bit of a stopgap role. He saw some minutes, but wasn't playing as much as some of the other guys. I mean, when you had Devon Hamilton and BB Landers in front of you, certainly a lot of snaps were spoken for at that point. I think he's going to be a player that is really going to be of interest for me to watch. If I'm not counting on us getting to see much practice, with our own eyes in person. I think they're going to try and keep us out of the Woody Hayes facility as much as possible. But, I think that right now that, my first two guys on top of the depth chart are Tommy and Haskell right now.
Yeah. When we talk about the starting lineup or whatever, with the defensive line at Ohio State, consider it 8 or 9 players. Don't consider it 4 players. And that's the same situation with Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent, probably the rotation at 3 tech, and Tommy Togi and Antoine Jackson at nose tackle. And really, the issue is there's not a lot of proven depth on the defensive line at defensive tackle for the Buckeyes. And nose tackle, the third guy may be Jerron Cage, who rarely plays. The other guys at 3 technique behind Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent. You're looking at Jaden McKenzie, a redshirt freshman, Cormonte Hamilton, a former tight end. So there's some question marks there, which is another reason why they need to continue hitting defensive tackle hard in the 2021 class. So I think at the top of the line, they'll be good. And as Kevin was saying about Antoine Jackson, this is his contract year. He started out at Auburn, transferred out to a junior college, then came to Ohio State, and this is his 3rd year at Ohio State, and has really not done much because Ohio State has been pretty deep at defensive tackle, nose tackle, but he's a mobile nose. He can play both spots on the inside, but they'll probably need him at nose this year.
Need you to do 2 things, folks. Hit the like button. That helps the channel, and also subscribe. That means when we're going live. You turn on the bell for the notifications once you subscribe, and when we're going live. We've already had a Miami show just prior to this one, and Ohio State, and we have several coming on over the next few days, and call-in shows as well. So please, again, subscribe. All right. I'll probably have to enlighten you 3 on some news from a few days ago. Ohio State signed a contract to play this team from the SEC. Alabama is actually the team that Ohio State has decided to play a home-and-home series with. So, Steve, any thoughts on that little superpower matchup?
Well, I think it's tremendous news. I think if you had a list of schools that Ohio State has played over the years and a list of schools that they are scheduled to play in the years ahead, it's been a who's who of college football. I mean, we've talked all about it. Miami, Texas, USC, Notre Dame, Washington, Oregon is this year and next year. They played TCU one time. Oklahoma, obviously, home and home. So really the list of schools that you want to see them play is that they haven't in recent years is down to Alabama, which they've never done a home and home with them, which they are now scheduled to do. Georgia, they've never done a home and home with them, which they are now scheduled to do after the Alabama series. Clemson would be one. They've only played them 3 times, I think, or I guess 4 times now in different bowl games. And, when you look at Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, they're at that upper echelon right now of college football, that top shelf, that top rung. So anytime you can get teams within that top rung to play one another, or even the rung below that, which right now is Georgia, Florida, Penn State, a few others, Oregon maybe, Oklahoma, obviously. Anytime you can get teams in those top 2 tiers to play against one another, you've got a major event on your hands, and the sport's going to basically come to a standstill just to watch that game, probably prime time in both instances at Ohio State and at Alabama. So very exciting stuff, and long time coming. and tremendous. Obviously, that two of the biggest brand names in the history of the sport are going to get together. A total rarity for an SEC team to come up and play in a Big Ten stadium. We've seen some neutral site games, even Lambeau Field. LSU played Wisconsin. I think it was at Lambeau Field, but it's been rare to see one of the power SEC teams come up above the Mason-Dixon line and play a game. So that's exciting in and of itself. And for it to be Alabama, and obviously the history that they just played in the playoff, 5 years ago, and Nick Saban, his history in Ohio, and Big Ten as well, and everything else. So I'm excited. I hope I'm here to see it in 5 or 6 years. Interested to get to go down to Tuscaloosa. I heard so much about it, and hoping that I'll be around still and be able to go to that. So, it's too soon to say who's going to be what in 2026, 2027 when these games will be played, because you just don't know what's going to happen with coaching situations. You assume that both programs are going to keep right on rolling and putting one class on top of another, and we'll still be in the top 5 then. But if Nick Saban retires and the next guy's not as good, then maybe they fall off a little bit. If Ryan Day goes to the NFL in 3 or 4 years, the next guy's not as good, they fall off a little bit, then maybe it's not the marquee matchup that it was supposed to be today. So I'm excited. I know everybody is looking forward to it. We can't have football in 2020. At least we know in 6 or 7 years we got the makings of an exciting home and home series, and really reminded me of the late 80s when they announced that Ohio State was going to play Notre Dame in 1995. There was like a 7-year lead up to that game, and I remember one of the beat reporters, Bruce Hooley, was on the local radio station here, and a caller called in and said, "Who do you think is going to win that game in 1995?" And Bruce said, "Well, considering the fact that the players who are playing in that game are currently in the 7th grade, it's impossible for me to just tell you who was going to win it." And at that time, Notre Dame was on top of the world in the late 80s, and Ohio State was trying to get up out of the dirt, basically. And within 6 years, John Cooper had assembled a powerhouse program, and they blew out Notre Dame in both games. So that was quite a turnabout there in a 6-year period.
Yeah, how about this scenario where Ryan Day has all the success at Ohio State, heads off to the NFL, they go over to the Fawcett Center and find one Urban Meyer who comes back for another little run. I'm not quite sure if Nick Saban would still be in Tuscaloosa, but that would be a fun story. And I'll just throw in one other series I would like to see that they had on the books briefly, and that's a series with Tennessee. And that's not necessarily because the Vols are killing it, but just being another one of those traditional SEC powers. Ohio State did have them on the schedule briefly before they got into this short-lived and underreported scheduling alliance with the Pac-12 that all went by the wayside as soon as the conference decided to go to 9 conference games. A lot of Ohio State and Big Ten haters like to say that Ohio State chickened out of that series, but that's not how it went down. It was because of that scheduling alliance.
Yes, they were also afraid of Vanderbilt, and so they had to scrap that series as well.
Yeah, so a lot of things come to mind here. So off the top of my head, and I think I was pretty thorough on this one, since the Alabama-Penn State series home and home, Vanderbilt and Missouri have visited Purdue. For some reason, Purdue's attracting the SEC, but both of them have had a home and home series with Purdue. So Vandy's been up there in the last year or two, and Mizzou before that, going to Purdue. But other than that, that's been it for the SEC. As Steve mentioned, LSU going to Lambeau Field, trading a Houston versus Lambeau Field site home and home of sorts, quasi home and homes with Wisconsin. I had the same experience, Steve, in regards to my remembrance of the Ohio State contract signing with Notre Dame. I was in school and big Notre Dame fans telling me, this, we don't really care about this. This isn't a big deal. This is going to be a blowout. And 5 years later, Ohio State's, they flipped positions with Notre Dame in the hierarchy. And somebody commented the other night in the call-in show that Ohio State scheduled Oklahoma. Of course, that was that 16 17 series, home and home, because their point was Ohio State is chicken to play because they backed out of the aforementioned series that you guys talked about with the SEC. So I ran down the opponents in recent years, and they mentioned that Ohio State only agreed to play Oklahoma because Oklahoma went 8-5 the year they signed the deal.
Quick note on
Ohio State's. The power brokers there, very short-sighted, thinking Oklahoma was going to show up with an 8-5 team every year. I think that really factors into these decisions. But I argued, I posted a video outlining the Ohio State-Alabama series and the excitement for obvious reasons. But I think this could be easily argued as the premier matchup in college football. For the one reason that you leave Clemson out of that equation is they're an elite power now, but not traditionally, not historically. These are the only two that are clearly elite right this second. And as Steve outlines, it could change in 7 years, but right this minute, they're elite and historically elite right at the top.
Quick note on the Vandy series. Ohio State, it was Vanderbilt, all joking aside, that backed out of that game. They actually had 2 Big Ten games that season, a game with Ohio State and a game with Northwestern, and backed out of both of them. I don't remember if it was a situation of where they were just hunting for wins, thinking that maybe they could become bowl eligible. They were trying to save their coach's job or something. But not only did they back out of them, but they backed out of them at about the 11th hour. And it left Ohio State scrambling, and I'm sure that Ohio State ended up with a directional opponent. But, we talk about Ohio State having to book these games that far out. Let's not forget that when Ohio State booked its home and home with Cal was a pretty good team, and then they were in the tank by the time Ohio State faced them. So sorry about your luck, Bama. 27-28, not going to be good years for you, Ohio State program killer.
And we know Nick Saban won't be there because he doesn't do road games, non-conference, and Alabama has been scheduling home and homes starting in like 2023 or 2024. So we know Nick Saban's time at Alabama is almost done.
Yeah.
In Northwestern, they just got through with a home and home with Stanford. They've played several home and homes recent years. I'm talking more than just the one home and home with Duke. They lined those up for like 4 to 6 consecutive years with Duke. So those academically minded or more minded institutions at the elite level have to stick together. So there you go. All right. That's the Ohio State show. That's what we got for you this week. I don't think there's anything else unless you guys think we missed anything you'd like to hit on. I don't see any further questions or topics in the live chat. Appreciate these three. We got Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove on Rivals, Tony Gerdeman at the top next to me from Buckeye Scoop, and of course Steve Hellwagon, gracious enough to post these videos on Bucknuts 247 Sports. So again, hope you guys appreciate that we can bring and rope in the very best in Ohio State media to talk Buckeyes each and every week. All right, guys, have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yep. Take care.